I never thought I would go from being an abandoned orphan to a lunatic, controlled by a mysterious voice. Prologue. I guess I was never really normal. My entire life wasn't really the ideal setting for any kind of story. I was abandoned as a child. A baby, actually. My life started out at Old Ridge Orphanage. I was literally shipped there inside of a cardboard box at 1:30 in the morning. Growing up, everyone told me my parents were most likely crazy or abusive because when I showed up at the orphanage around months, there was a code of some sort tattooed on my right collarbone, 𝐖𝐴1027GH. No one is really sure what it means. That's one of the reasons behind my present-day nickname. Others include my appearance. Besides the tattoo, I was taller than the rest of the kids my age. My height caused others to think I was 3 or 4 years older than I actually was. I wasn't as petite as the other girls in the orphanage. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I had more of a boyish figure, and I was much stock-IER. My attitude towards others also may have affected it. As well, I was always on edge versus the other children. My cautious nature made it hard to make friends. I was stronger than the rest of the orphans. They didn't like to play with me because I was far too rough for just any 5-year-old. I accidentally broke a 7-year-old boy's jaw when I was by backhanding him for taking my crayons. I don't really think I'll ever forget that because all of the kids would hold their hands over their mouths when they'd seen me for nearly a year. I got really violent around the age of 12. Adults and children made sure to steer clear of me. I didn't sleep as well due to severe body aches and pains which caused me to be extremely moody. I stopped growing taller, but I no longer had a baby face like the rest of the children my age. I could have passed as a 16 or 17-year-old by that time. I had a much harder jawline than even some of the boys there. My strength doubled and so did my cautiousness. I was always on alert and nothing really ever got by me. I could hear, see and even smell things 10 times better than before. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It was annoying, and it drove me crazy, but I learned to control it after a while. I truly believe that, by this time, no one even remembered my real name. I was only known as lunatic by everyone besides the ladies from the orphanage. I didn't really want to believe them, but I couldn't help but start to once I started hearing a voice in my head. It wasn't really a friendly voice. It was more violent than anything, but it cared about me in a way that no one had ever really did. The voice never wanted to hurt me, just other people. I didn't hate the voice, but it would make me angry. Some days I'd get so frustrated that I'd punch holes in the walls or shatter mirrors. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I couldn't fix the mirrors, but I did cover the holes in the walls with pictures that the toddlers and little kids would draw. By this time, everyone was on edge, and I'm pretty sure what happened next was the last straw. It was the first time it ever happened, and at the time, I had no idea how to control it. That led me to not really remember what happened. I remember being yelled at for another shattered mirror when something inside of me just snapped. My mind went foggy for what seemed like seconds as my body did things I had no control over. When I finally managed to snap out of my dazed state, I trashed the room I was in, snapped the woman's arm, crushed her collarbone, and hurt 3 others in the process. At age 13, I was sent to the BRX4 mental institution. I was seen as a threat to everything and anything. I was apparently far too mentally unstable to be near children. My state only worsened the first year. I was constantly going into the dazed and fuzzy state and waking up tied to a bed in a room alone. The voice got louder while in the hospital. Rarely would it say whole sentences. Usually, it was just 1 or 2 word phrases. Sometimes, it would even scream or hum for hours on end. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I would just scream or talk back to the voice. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'd get so frustrated with it that I'd start pulling my hair or hitting my head against walls. Eventually, I got better at hiding it and focused on acting civilized. People started noticing. The doctors would sit down and have light conversations with me, which is something that no one had ever done. That not only made me calm, but even the voice inside of me would hum lightly in content. I think all the voice ever wanted was for me to be happy. After being in the hospital for 3 years, I decided to ask about becoming a voluntary patient at 16. Most of the doctors that I asked about it agreed with me, so I decided to take the step and sign the document asking for permission. Once I was officially a voluntary patient, I could ask for voluntary admission to leave. That is how exactly 1 year later, I was finally acceptable to the public. I was no longer walking around feeling like a lunatic. I was odd and 𝐿𝐸𝐳, although deep inside I still knew I was insane. But I knew how to control it so that it had to count for something. Chapter 1, Almighty Tree Whisperer, please. I need this job. I can't, then the door was slammed into my face. Afford to have another door slammed in my face again by another rude person like you. I yelled loudly hoping she would hear, but failed. The only attention I managed to catch were random people on the street. They didn't say anything, but a few laughed quietly. That's what I felt like. Lately, a joke. Everywhere I go, people seem to find enjoyment in my failure. No one gives me a chance. No one. But despite it all, I keep my mouth closed. It has been difficult. I won't lie. I didn't expect it to be this way. Enthusiasm, in the movies, everything seems so much better. Everyone is so much friendlier and life is so much easier. Not in reality. Society today is harsh. That should be what everyone laughs at because society is the joke. After leaving the old rich orphanage, I thought the hospital was bad. No, living out here is bad. I spent most of my time jumping cities and towns looking for jobs all for nothing. No one wants a dirty, homeless orphan girl working for them. That is the conclusion I have come to. No one cares if you are the hardest working person on the face of the earth. If you don't fit the ideal image of society, you don't deserve their time. It isn't my entire fault for not being able to shower. I need money to buy shampoo and a shower. The voice in my head whined. It was upset because I was upset. It just wanted me to be happy, but the past 2 weeks were filled with nothing but sorrow. Pushing away the chuckles of the rude people surrounding me, I decided to just find a park or anywhere to sleep for the night. It was only about noon, but it's better to know where you are going to set up camp for the night ahead of time. I have learned it. When you don't have money, obviously you can't afford anything a normal person would be able to afford, which includes motel rooms. So, bus stop and park benches had become my best friend. I didn't lift my eyes up from the sidewalk I walked on. I wasn't scared, more like ashamed. I didn't want to look at anyone because as long as they look better than I do, they believe they're better than me. I never used to believe silly things like that. But lately I have. I knew the moment I looked up at some woman jogging down the pavement with her fancy Nikes on, her freshly washed hair pulled back into a ponytail, and expensive cell-phone blasting music into her ears through shiny new earbuds. I'd probably have a mental breakdown. I don't think people understand how much that can hurt. I wouldn't. Eventually, I found the community park. There weren't a lot of people there. I'm guessing it's because of the dark clouds that seem to be gathering in the sky. I expected it to rain since it seemed to be doing that a lot lately. Great. I thought, thinking about just how much I was starting to hate April. I shook away the pessimistic comment from the voice in my head and continued walking through the park until I found the jackpot. It was a little playset, but there was a little house type of thing at the top. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It wasn't really a house. It was a platform above the ground that had slides coming out of the sides, but it had a roof-looking thing over it. It was perfect for me. I didn't go up to inspect my own little section of heaven. There were still children playing on it, and I didn't want to scare them. It was like a knife piercing my heart seeing little kids look at me like I was a diseased animal. Gulping back my insecurities, I decided to just go sit down at a picnic table. Getting off of my aching feet felt extremely good. It felt amazing. I wanted to laugh at myself. I didn't realize I would come to this point in my life where I was actually mentally celebrating for finding something to sleep on other than a bench or being able to take a break. That's when it hit me. I couldn't help the tear that fell from my eye. I pulled on my greasy, dark brown hair as I laid my face onto the picnic table. I sat like that for a moment, just letting whatever tear that wanted to be free escape. I wiped my eyes, most likely just making them red and puffy versus the usual cool grey color. Grey eyes aren't very common. When I was younger, everyone was mesmerized by them. It made me wonder if my parents had grey eyes. To this day I still wonder. My thoughts were interrupted when the voice in my head let out a noise that resembled a growl. I jumped in surprise when my eyesight suddenly got sharper. My sight landed on someone by the edge of the forest. All that I seen was blonde hair. As quickly as I seen them, they vanished. "Stop growling," I mumbled to the voice. I said it low enough that no one would be able to hear me, but there was always that feeling that someone would hear me and demand I be sent back to 𝐵𝐸𝐴𝐸𝐴𝐸𝐴𝐸𝐴𝐸. I gulped and drummed my fingers on their wooden table. I decided that it would be best to search around the town once more for a job of some kind before the night. If I had no luck, then I'd leave tomorrow morning. The rest of the day resulted in the same way it usually did. People looked at me like I was garbage, and by the end of the day, I felt like it too. They didn't have to say anything for me to know that I wasn't accepted. I don't think they meant for me to know what they were thinking. But actions speak louder than words sometimes. I made my way back to the park. My feet hurt and my stomach crumbled from being empty for so long. I wiped one last tear from my eye as I walked across the road that led to the park. I walked through the gate. My first night of sleeping on benches scared me to death. I didn't sleep at all. As the week went on, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I got used to the eerie noises of the night. Now I don't have any problems with them, but something was different about this night. I was about halfway through the park when I heard a rustle in the trees. Usually, I just brush it off knowing it was the wind. But I knew this wasn't just something I could pass off as me being the almighty tree whisperer. I could feel my senses shift. Everything got so much sharper, my vision, sense of smell, and hearing. I could hear what sounded like footsteps, but they were fast. I whipped my head to the right, then the left. I turned around and could feel my heart rate accelerate. Then, I felt the familiar haze wash over me. I could still see what I was doing and feel everything, but I wasn't controlling what I was about to do. As quickly as the thought went away, my body turned left and caught someone's hand just inches away from my face. The hand was small, smaller than mine, but it wasn't like a child's hand. It was a woman for sure. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My eyes quickly focused in on the person's face to see the familiar blonde hair from early. A growl of some sort escaped the girl's lips as she grabbed my wrist and flipped me onto my back. I landed with a thud. She didn't wait a moment before lunging at me. As if it were a reflex, my legs came up effortlessly and kicked her quite a long distance into a tree. The sound of her body colliding with the tree sounded something like thunder. I found it funny considering it just seemed to stop storming. I hopped up just as she pulled herself away from the tree. Suddenly, a snarl left her lips before a large blonde wolf stood where she stood. I wanted to scream. The wolf was huge. Its head was probably the size of my entire body. I tried screaming, but nothing came out. A similar snarl sounded through the air. It came from me. The wolf or girl, or whatever it is, launched itself at me at the same time my body started running toward it. I was screaming. I didn't know what I was doing. It was like someone cut the brakes on a car as it was speeding down a hill. I couldn't stop. My arms swung out just in time to line the wolf, knocking it onto its back. It listened growl another ear-piercing growl, and so did I in return. The wolf got back up to attack me at the same time that I decided it would be a good idea to charge it at once. My hands tried grabbing the wolf's front left paw, but instead I missed and ended up tumbling to the ground under the wolf. I was screaming, but my body just let out a frustrated snarl and rolled backward before the wolf could trample on me. The wolf unexpectedly snapped its jaws at me, knocking me backward. It took the opportunity to jump on top of me. I thought I was going to die right there. I guess the voice thought I was, too, because it gave up and just gave me control again. The first thing I did was scream. Yes, it was ear-piercing. No, I do not think there was a single person who did not hear me. The wolf shifted back into the blonde-haired girl. The action had me practically having an aneurysm. I just laid there underneath her with my mouth open. Oh my God. I screamed as I raised up my hip and turned, unexpectedly throwing her off of me. I stood up trying to escape. I ran only a few seconds. I couldn't even get help out entirely before I was tackled. Will you shut up? Seriously? The blonde said, obviously annoyed. I didn't really know if I should listen to her or not, but I did anyway. Her face was just visible due to the street lights. She had a deep red lipstick on. Her dark brown eyes were nearly black, and her blonde hair tumbled down her shoulders in ringlets. You're a monster. I screamed at her. She scoffed. Let's not point fingers here, Wolfie. I just stared at her wide-eyed. She's the crazy wolf girl here. Now, why are you here? Your pack planning to expand territory. Is that it? She snapped. My mouth just hung open. My lips moved, but no words came out. Come on, Mutt. I have no idea what you are talking about, I said hysterically. She huffed and glared at me with those dark eyes. Where the hell is your pack? Why did they send you? She asked, squeezing my wrists rather painfully. If you're going to kill me, can you at least put some clothes on? I asked on the bridge of tears. I was in hysterics as this stranger was holding me to the ground in all of her without clothes glory. I would kill you, but Kieran wants to question you before he does away with you, she said, before getting off of me. I tried getting up, but her bare foot came down on my torso, holding me down. The voice in my head growled loudly. You're kidnapping me, then killing me. Oh my God. To my 𝐿𝐴𝐷𝐸 𝐷𝐸 heartfelt thanks for your unfading 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐼𝐴𝐷𝐸. She just rolled her eyes at me before untying something from her ankle. It was a large shirt. She threw it on, along with a pair of underwear. Don't sound so surprised. You know what we do. What? What the heck are you? I shouted, wind. She quirked an eyebrow at me. Are you joking me? Or are you just stupid? I don't know, I shouted, throwing my hands in the air. You're in shredder territory, she stated before landing a kick to the side of my head, knocking me out. I still had no clue what she was talking about. Chapter 2, Wolf thingy. I woke up to a pounding headache and some muscles everywhere. I squeezed my eyes shut and clenched my teeth at the unfamiliar feeling. I tried pulling my hands down to my face, but they were stopped by something wrapped around my wrists. My eyes snapped open and immediately flew to my wrists. They were tied to the headboard of a bed by rope. I tried yanking my hands, but that just made the headboard smack off of the wall. There's no use in trying. A voice spoke up, startling me. I jumped and searched the room until my eyes landed on the girl who had attacked me. I didn't say anything. I just sat there with my mouth hanging open. I didn't know what to say. Honestly, I wanted to cry. Just 2 weeks of freedom, and I was already tied up. Again. The ropes aren't laced. You're just too weak to break them at the moment. We put silver in your system to weaken you a bit, she explained. I tried focusing on what she was saying, but it just didn't seem to make sense. She didn't make sense. She sounded like she was trying to seem sympathetic, but her tone was angry. Her calm features made her seem like she was trying to be nice, but her eyes were deceiving. The dark brown orb seemed to glare at me with intensity. She seemed as if she were an angel. Her golden hair came down in ringlets just below her shoulders, and her high cheekbones were prominent on her pale face. She had a small piercing just above the right of her red lips. It made me a bit self-conscious knowing that I looked nothing like her. My hair was anything but angelic. It was a dirty, dark brown that was chopped off at my shoulders. Her eyes looked menacing and deep. Mine were just a dull grey that hadn't been bright and vibrant since I was little. Her entire body just screamed femininity, but also power. She had curves like no other person I'd ever seen. Mine just screamed. I haven't eaten in 2 weeks, but I still managed to have the body of a 15-year-old boy. Am I gonna die in here? I asked quietly, scared of the answer. She shook her head. No, she stated, walking over to a chair on the far corner of the room. She looked tired, which made me wonder if she had gotten any sleep. Am I gonna die at all? I dared to ask. She huffed and shook her head again. She didn't say anything else. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I didn't say anything for a moment. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want her or anyone else who might be here with her to kill me. I just wanted to get out. What am I doing here? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I asked hesitantly. She looked up at me for a moment, her dark eyes staring into mine like it was the most normal thing in the world. That's not my place to tell you, she said with not a trace of emotion. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. I looked away from her and looked around the room I was in. I could tell it wasn't just some random room. It belonged to someone. There were a few T-shirts on the wooden floor. There was a desk with some pictures, newspaper articles, and random papers pushed pinned to the wall and scattered on the desk. A shiver ran through me as I looked at the bedside table to see a pistol sitting beside an alarm clock and a lamp. My snooping was interrupted when the door was opened. Standing in the door was what I'd imagine a guard would look like. The voice in my head was humming extremely loud. I'd be drooling if I weren't tied to a bed in some strange place after being attacked by some wolf girl. He had dark brown hair that could have passed as being black. His eyes were a vibrant shade of green which stood out due to his tan skin. I could clearly tell that he was in shape thanks to the tight black shirt he had on. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The girl said, standing up and nodding her head to the man. I furrowed my eyebrows together at the name. That was odd. Marilyn, he said, doing the same to the girl. I internally sighed now that I knew the girl's name. It was starting to get on my nerves. Marilyn exited the room as the man stepped into it. He walked over to me without saying a word and untied my wrists. I tensed up as his hands graced my skin and shocks rushed through me. I focused on what he was doing and watched him intensely as he walked around the bed to untie my other hand. I wanted to reach my hands out and run them down his perfect jawline, but figured that would be creepy and he'd probably shoot me. Once he was done untying my hands, he crouched down in front of me as I sat up in the bed. I rubbed my wrists, which were irritated because of the ropes. He didn't say anything. He just watched. What are you gonna do to me? I asked quietly. He scared me more than Marilyn did. I figured the best way to make it out of this situation alive was just to listen to him. Well, I'm going to take you downstairs and make you something to eat. Then, you can get a shower because it's obvious that you need one. I'll get you clean clothes. And then you are gonna come back up here and relax because you're obviously tired, he said with sincerity. I wasn't sure what to say to that. I questioned whether or not to say anything else to him. His gaze seemed so heavily focused on me that it made it a bit hard to breathe. My nerves were spreading throughout my body like wildfire as I could feel my body slowly get goosensed in his presence. Who are you? I asked, furrowing my eyebrows at him. He looked at me for a moment before answering. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My heart skipped a beat with the mention of his name. I don't know how, but the way he said it was extremely attractive. That wasn't what caused my heart to do such an odd action. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. This was the man Marilyn spoke about before. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The voice in my head snarled out. I shook my head slightly, trying to tell it to stop. Kieran sat in front on me with a confused expression, probably wondering why I shaking my head. She giving you a hard time or something? He asked, which caught me off guard. I scanned his emotionals' face for any type of emotion I could find, but I couldn't even seem to see the curiosity that it once held just moments ago. 𝐿𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐸 𝐬𝐻𝐸, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Your wolf, he dragged out. I looked at him as if he were talking gibberish. You mean the voice? I asked quietly. Now it was his turn to look at me as if I were crazy. I knew saying it was pretty dumb and slightly psychotic of me, but at the mention of it, the voice in my head seemed to squeal in satisfaction. What? I have no idea what you're talking about. He lifted his hand up to the side of my head and tapped it with his finger. Your wolf, she's in here. I watched him as he tried explaining it to me. I jerked my head back so he wasn't so close. You're one of those wolf things, too, I concluded. He nodded, which caused my throat to run dry. He looked at me in confusion for a moment. His eyebrows furrowed together as his beautiful green eyes scanned my face. Did you hit your head back there? Kieran asked. If you're asking if I have amnesia, then, no, I do not. I can remember everything from the orphanage until now. I rambled like I normally do when I'm nervous. Kieran intimidated me, which was no secret. The only reason I was talking to him was because I was far too afraid to ignore him. 𝐿𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐸 𝐬𝐻𝐸, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He questioned. I cleared my throat and sat up a bit straighter. Yeah. I nodded. I grew up in the Aldridge orphanage until I was 13 and got sent away to some mental hospital. I spoke quietly, sadness lacing its way into my voice. Everyone called me a lunatic, and they said I probably got it from my parents. His hands twitched a bit in his lap, almost making it seem as if he were trying to make a fist, and he looked a bit mad. I figured I should just shut up, so I didn't continue. I didn't want to die. Why would they think that? Kieran asked once he realized I wasn't going to say much more. I breathed in deeply before hesitantly pulling down the collar of my shirt and showing him the faded tattoo on my collarbone. This was tattooed on me when I arrived at the orphanage. They all think my parents were probably drunken idiots, I stated sadly. Kieran looked at the tattoo with a deep amount of concentration. He ran his warm fingers across it, and then let out a growl which startled me. His face seemed to soften slightly when he seen me jump and cower back in fear. You grew up away from your parents because someone took you, he shot out. My eyes grew to the size of saucers at what he had said. What? I shouted on accident. It wasn't my fault. 𝐿𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐸 𝐬𝐻𝐸, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I was just taken back. Someone took me from my parents. It doesn't usually happen, but there are certain groups of people who track down people like you. They take you from your parents and try selling you. But something must have happened, and you ended up at that orphanage. Kieran said more to himself than to me. How do you know? I wasn't sure why, but I believed him. Something about the fact that he was giving me some sort of story, something no one else could give me in 17 years, gave me a bit of hope. I've met some of them, he muttered angrily. Well, why would they do that? I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry from sadness or happiness, but I was positive I was about to burst into tears at any given moment. I held the waterworks in. 𝐿𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐸 𝐬𝐻𝐸, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Well, you'd have to know what you are in order to understand why it happened, he said, exasperated as he ran his hand down his face. I kept quiet for a moment, the constant question still ringing in the back of my hand, asking me if he could actually know what happened. But there was also a part of me, a very large part, that feared and did not trust this man. I was at a bit of a war with myself. Then tell me, 𝐿𝐷𝐸𝐻𝐸 𝐬𝐻𝐸, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Finally, I didn't really want to be so straightforward. The man in front of me claims he knows what's wrong with me. He might be able to give me answers that I've been searching for my entire life. So yeah, it came out a little more straightforward than I would have liked. The voice, or my wolf as Kieran called it, was practically screaming in my mind at the thought of this man being so close to us. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐻𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐻𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Was all she was saying on repeat. You seen Marilyn in the park? Right. When she shifted, I nodded slowly. I didn't like remembering what happened at the park. Although nothing too awful happened, it was still terrifying. That's what you are. I gulped. I knew as soon as I seen Marilyn change into that monster at the park that I was like her too. It all made sense seeing it happen, but I really didn't want to believe it. I'm a wolf thing, I said, slightly terrified. Not only was I terrified of what he was saying, but the fact that he could go all wolf, boy on me and rip me to shreds played on my mind a bit too. No, you were a werewolf, he corrected me. I clenched my teeth together in silence and nodded, signaling for him to go on. A werewolf usually shifts around 13, but since you were in the orphanage, your wolf probably knew it wasn't safe, so she just stayed dormant. It made sense a bit. I mean, 13 was around the age I started acting so weird. Maybe she just became restless. That makes sense. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐻𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The voice in your head is her. Your wolf, he reminded me. Now, this is the tricky part. So there are actually a lot of us. Usually, werewolves run in packs. He explained. Every pack has to have leaders. There are 3 ranks of leaders. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐻𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I nodded my head again, showing him I understood. The alphas, betas, and gamma-s. There's more than one. I asked, noticing how he pluralized each one of them. There's a female and male for each rank. The alphas are like the top of everything. The betas are second and gamma-s are third. Now, usually these 3 ranks don't have female children, he said, which made me confused. How is that possible? Why, that's not fair, I said, making him psyop-like behavior. I didn't know if he was frustrated with me or not, so I just decided to close my mouth before I got myself in trouble. The male gene is more dominant, I guess, because those 3 ranks are supposed to produce the strongest hairs of the pack. So usually they just have boys. That's ridiculous, I muttered to myself, but he heard me, making him roll his eyes at me. Yeah, well, it didn't work for you, apparently. I narrowed my eyes at him questioningly as he cracked his knuckles. Yeah, you're the daughter of one of them. I don't know which one or which pack. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐿𝐻𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Kieran said as he shook out his hands. Well, how do you know that? Me, the daughter of a high-ranking werewolf. It sounds absolutely ludicrous if you asked me, but so did the idea of werewolves before I was attacked by one. Those people that took you, that's what they do. I know that's them because they put a tracking mark on you, he explained while pulling down the collar of my shirt to look at the tattoo again. I don't know what it means, but I know that they do it so they know who each girl is. By the time he was finished, all I could do was make an O shape with my mouth. It was a lot to take in. I'd admit that I wasn't going to have a breakdown though, as much as I wanted to, because if I did he might stop or kill me. I mean, he could really kill me at any moment. I just needed to know more. But what's the point? I asked, chewing on the inside of my lip. It's their job. They capture these girls and sell them to other packs for money. Some girls are sent to train to be warriors, or some are used for giving alphas stronger heirs, he explained. How could someone do that? Just take someone away from their family? That's twisted, I said, making Kieran tense up. I didn't know why, but my imagination started rolling and I figured I wasn't the first person he had captured. The thought instantly made a cold feeling rush through me. I thought of him doing something so awful. I pushed the thought away to focus on what Kieran had to say next. It's who they are. It's how they survive, Kieran stated, sounding defensive. I didn't want to make him angry, so I only nodded. I didn't know what he'd do to me if he got mad enough. Probably shoot me with the pistol on the side table. The thought had crossed my mind a few times to just pick up the handgun and bound a bullet right into his pretty little skull. But my wolf snarled at me for thinking about it, and I had no clue how to even use a gun. Come on, he said, interrupting me from my murder mission thoughts as he got up from his crouching position. I didn't ask where we were going. I just prayed it was to the kitchen like he said we were going to go earlier. I don't think my wolf really cared. 𝐿𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬𝐭 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐝. Because all she was saying was mine, the entire time we left the room. Chapter 3, Fatten Me Now. Eat me later, to be honest. I wasn't in the most comfortable predicament. Kieran stood by his word and brought me to the kitchen for food. I hadn't realized Marilyn would be there as well. 𝐿𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬𝐭 𝐿𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬𝐭. She was sitting at the table when we walked in. Her attention was focused solely on her cell phone. Her blonde hair was wet, indicating she most likely just had a shower, which made me even more self-conscious than usual. I knew for a fact that I smelled and looked horrible. Kieran more or less ordered me to sit down at the table with her. I obeyed him and sat at the table. Marilyn looked at me from the corner of her eye for just a moment and then looked back down at her phone. Any notice from Bolton? Kieran asked out loud. No, not since yesterday, Marilyn murmured in response. Kieran let out a low growling noise which made me jump. Marilyn snapped her head up in annoyance. Do you want to know how close the bordering packs are getting or not? She stated with an angry tone that I could tell by the look on Kieran's face that he did not like at all. That's what I thought, she said, returning back to whatever she was doing on her phone. I wanted to ask about the bordering packs. I wanted to know how many there were, if they were friendly, or who they even were. I didn't. 𝐿𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬𝐭 𝐿𝐢𝐳𝐷𝐞𝐬𝐭. Marilyn and Kieran both seemed angered by the topic, so I didn't want to make it any worse. I still didn't trust these people, and I definitely don't trust Marilyn. I wouldn't be surprised if she stabbed me with the fork that I ended up eating with. I looked back to watch Kieran as he started breaking eggs into a pan. A delicious aroma instantly permeated the room. He seemed to know exactly what he was doing as he grabbed random spices and such from a cupboard to the left of him and sprinkled them into the pan. The amazing smell had my stomach crumbling in hunger from my lack of food. Kieran turned his head to the side to look at me. His eyes scanned up and down my body once before turning around to focus on what he was making. I on the other hand at the table, my cheeks flushing a deep red. Marilyn chuckled quietly at my embarrassment. I just kept my head down, listening to the sizzles coming from the pan. Soon enough, a plate was set in front of me on the table. I lifted my head to see the largest pile of eggs I have ever set eyes on. My mouth hung open in awe as I looked up at Kieran, who looked down at me with a serious expression. Eat, he ushered. I gulped and looked down at the food. I felt my stomach tense up from hunger and nerves. I didn't know what was in the eggs. How would I know he wasn't trying to poison me? You need to eat so your human strength can grow. Without it, your wolf can overpower you at any time, which is why you have a difficult time controlling her. My stomach growled once again, indicating my hunger as I moved my gaze down to the plate of eggs. They looked so good, but in my defense they could have been a large plate of deep fried ants and I would have eaten them. I looked back up at Kieran once more with a nervous expression before cutting a piece of an egg with my fork. I popped the egg into my mouth and was immediately greeted by a delicious burst of flavor. I inwardly moaned at the taste and immediately began indulging in the rest. The amazing feeling of my stomach not aching for once seemed to make me forget that I was in the presence of two extremely dangerous people eating food that one of them had just made for me. I was halfway done with the plate when I heard the sound of another plate hit the table. I looked up from my plate of eggs to see Kieran placing another plate on the table. This time, the plate was piled with anything from bacon to hash browns. "Are you eating too?" I asked quietly. "No, this is for you," he said, making my mouth drop. There was no way I could eat all of that. He walked over to the fridge and pulled out a water bottle and sat it on the table beside my first plate. "I can't eat all of this," I said in disbelief while looking into his green eyes. "Yes, you can," he stated, looking back into my grey ones. "And you will." I gulped, slowly turning my head back to the 2 plates. "There's no way," I retorted in a voice so small that I'm surprised he heard me. I was cautious of the situation. It seemed like he was trying to fatten me up so he could eat me later like Hansel and Gretel. A wolf alone can eat 2 times the amount of a human. You are not only feeding a wolf but yourself, which means you should be eating 3 times what a human should be eating, Kieran explained. I was used to the small portions I usually got at the orphanage and hospital. I just figured the reason I was always hungry was just because I wanted to eat out of boredom. Although I was nearly finished with the large plate of eggs, I knew I was still hungry. I just nodded my head slightly at Kieran and turned back to the plate. I slowly picked up a small piece of bacon, turned my head toward Kieran, and slowly bit off a piece of it. He just gave me a small nod before walking over to the sink full of now dirty dishes and began washing them. I ate almost all of the food. Halfway through the second plate, I couldn't seem to eat much more. Marilyn took the opportunity to munch on whatever was left over once I told Kieran I was full. He seemed a bit weary of me, but let it slide once I asked about having a shower. He led me to the room I was in when I woke up. I wanted to ask who the room belonged to, but I already had a pretty good idea. The room just screamed Kieran. He walked over to a drawer and pulled out a T-shirt and a pair of boxers. At least I knew that the room wasn't Marilyn's. I followed him as he opened a door across from the door that we entered the room and walked inside. As I assumed, it was a bathroom. It wasn't extremely fancy, but it still seemed to amaze me how he managed to have such a nice house at his age. He only looked a bit older than me. 𝐊𝐤𝐳𝐳 𝐷𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐵 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, he said, handing me the clothes. "You'll have to wear these until Marilyn finds something suitable for you to wear, or I get you some clothing." I took the clothes from his hand and nodded. I suppose he took that as his cue to leave. Wait. The words came tumbling out of my mouth before I had time to stop myself. He stopped and turned to look at me, his eyebrows furrowed together. Thanks," I said, making my cheeks flush red again. "For the shower," I added quickly. Something flashed in his eyes as a small smile graced his godly face. Without another word, he left the room. I smiled to myself. I was allowed. It wasn't a crime. I felt comfortable here, which was odd. Sure, I didn't feel extremely safe, but I didn't feel different, which made me feel happy. I'd rather feel uncomfortable over unwanted any day. Getting into the shower had to have been the best part of my day so far. Mostly because no one was there to bother or intimidate me. I didn't wash my hair once, but 3 times actually. I even washed every inch of my body twice. I really wanted to shave. Like really wanted to. But there wasn't a razor, so of course I snooped for one. I left the shower running as I stepped out. I wrapped a towel around my body before opening and all I could find. The first drawer just had washcloths and towels, but I did find what I was looking for in the second drawer. And a bit more. I picked up the package of razors to take one out when something else caught my eye. My eyes widened as I picked up the small, foiled package. I stared for just a moment before throwing down the condom with a squeal. I quickly snatched a razor out of the box, threw the box back into the drawer, and then slammed the drawer shut. I looked up from the drawer and looked into the mirror above the cabinet. My eyes were opened wide and my face was obviously flushed. You did not just see or touch that, I told myself in the mirror. I took a deep breath and looked down at the razor. Right, I said before walking back into the shower. The rest of my shower I only kept my focus on shaving my legs, underarms, and anywhere else before stashing the razor above a cabinet that hung on the wall. I didn't want to open it. I was far too scared at this point. I did everything in my power to avoid looking at the drawer that the razors and that thing was in. I unraveled the shirt and boxers from the ball that Kieran had handed me them in. The clothes smelled just like him. I threw the maroon-colored shirt on with the boxers. The only issue I had was that the boxers were too big. I attempted yanking them up, but they just kept falling down. Eventually, I found that rolling the waistband helped make them smaller. The thing that frustrates me. 𝐿𝐤𝐧𝐠 𝐬𝐩𝐭𝐢𝐨𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, was the fact that it went from being about knee length to higher than mid-thigh. I shrugged it off knowing there was no other way and walked into the room with my clothes and towel. I expected the room to be empty, but it wasn't. Marilyn was sitting in the same chair she was sitting in earlier before Kieran came in. I started to say, but she cut me off. "How was your shower?" she questioned. Her dark eyes were trained on me. "Good," I replied, still holding the towel and my dirtied clothes in my hands. She seemed to think for a moment before nodding. "Looks like it." She stood up and took the towel and my clothes. "I'll wash these. Kieran is in the meeting room downstairs. You'll find it on your left past the kitchen." She turned to walk out the door. I watched as she walked through the room with a large amount of authority and grace, but stopped in the doorway. Marilyn turned to look at me as her blonde hair whipped behind her shoulder. "You'll hear him before you find him," she said before exiting. I gulped and felt a shiver run through me. It was no secret that Marilyn scared me to levels unknown. I shook the thought away of Marilyn as I made my way downstairs. The house wasn't too big, but it was late enough to make me question which way I was going. Eventually, I did find the kitchen. Marilyn was right. I did hear him, and he sounded angry. The thought of him being angry set something off inside of me. The voice in my head let some sort of whine at the thought. "You were gone for almost 2 days, and you come back with this." I heard Kieran's angry shouts as something that sounded like papers were slammed onto a table. I gulped nervously and looked around the area. I noticed that there was a door at the opposite end of the hall that I just walked up. I contemplated running down to it. It was a constant thought replaying in my mind, but I didn't want to. I didn't know why, but I just couldn't find myself actually wanting to find out if it would lead me to the outside. "It's not nothing. We know where they are now. That's what you wanted." Another man's voice sounded throughout the hallway. I slowly walked down the other end of the hall to the door where the angry rants were coming. I stopped in front of it when I heard a snarl. I didn't know whether to interrupt or not. Marilyn told me to come down and find him, but then again she could have just sent me here to get me killed. I closed my eyes and yanked the door open. Immediately, 2 pairs of eyes landed on me. A pair of green ones and a pair of baby blues. The blue-eyed, brown-haired man let out a loud growl as soon as he set eyes on me. Immediately, Kieran let out a growl of his own. A single word followed it. 𝐿𝐤𝐧𝐠𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I jumped back in fear. I turned to bolt out the door when Kieran stopped me now. "Stop," he said to me, making me come to an abrupt halt. I turned to look at the M with fear evident on my face. Kieran must have noticed because his features turned from one of seriousness to one of sympathy. "Go back to my room and sleep. You need it." I didn't object. I practically bolted out of the room. 𝐿𝐤𝐧𝐠𝐬 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It was official. Every person in this house scared the crap out of me, and I was truly insane for actually wanting to stay here. On the bright side, at least I knew who the room belonged to, although I kind of assumed it all along. Chapter 4 Blonde Ultimate Fighter, Wolf, Chick. I woke up because something stirred the attention of the voice in my head, or wolf thing. A loud bark sounded through my head, causing my entire body to jolt forward. My eyes opened as soon as my body sat up. Instantly, my grey eyes connected with a pair of green ones. Kieran only stopped in that brief moment before moving for the chair that Marilyn usually sat in. I didn't say anything. I just sat there with my legs crossed on the bed. Kieran looked like he wanted to say something, but instead he just sat there watching me with his lips pursed as if he were thinking of what he wanted to say before he said it. So we both just sat there in silence. Eventually, Kieran composed his thoughts and spoke. "Are you still tired?" His tone seemed more curious than anything, almost like he were observing and questioning an experiment. I really didn't like the idea of him thinking of me as just some experiment. My wolf let out some sort of strange snarling noise that made me flinch slightly. I decided to just nod, not really trusting my voice in the situation. It seems like every time I talk to him, I give away way more information than I should. 𝐿𝐤𝐧𝐼𝐸 𝐊𝐢𝐳 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐼𝐸. It was a good thing that I mentioned the tattoo and all, but I'd never told anyone that willingly. I don't know why I felt so obliged to tell him other than the fear I seem to feel all the time while I'm here. "I didn't think you would be considering you've been sleeping for days," he said as if it were nothing. My eyes bugged out of my head as I realized what he had said. I asked, shocked. He nodded before explaining. "Well, it's been," he began counting days on his fingers. 1, 2, about 2.5 days. Kieran finished. 2.5 nerve-wracking days, he whispered to himself. But I had just managed to catch it. I didn't say anything about it though. 𝐿𝐤𝐧𝐼𝐸 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It actually made me feel a little happy that the man in front of me may have been worried about me while I slept. That's bad. 𝐿𝐤𝐧𝐼𝐸 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Right. I mean, I haven't eaten anything, let alone drank anything. I ranted. Your wolf is healing with what she has. She needs the rest, and you do, too. I gulped and nodded. Hearing him say my wolf aloud once again clarified in fact where I was. Not to be rude or anything, I said quietly, not looking up at him while I played with my hands. But why do you care so much? I looked back up at him. I could tell by the certain look in his eye that he was taken back. It's my job to protect you. What he said came out more like an order than something sincere, almost as if he were trying to convince himself of what he was saying. You've known me for like 3 days. 2 of them I was asleep. I shot back without really thinking. I wasn't mad at all. More like confused. I barely knew this man, and now he's made it his mission to protect me. And your point is? He genuinely looked confused. If I'm being honest, he seemed more confused than I was. I don't know. My voice was soft once again as I looked back down at my hands. I did know. I just didn't know how to say. Hey buddy, you don't know me. You know of me, and that's just because your little blonde, ultimate fighter, Wolf jiggered act and kidnapped me, bringing me here. You don't know me. In a nice way. Don't be so afraid of me. Kieran's voice seemed slightly angry but more frustrated than anything. He didn't yell it, but it came out loud enough to make me flinch away. He groaned, caused me to look up at him. I couldn't help but be worried that he was upset. This should not be this hard, he muttered, dragging his hand through his tousled, dark brown hair. What shouldn't be? He looked up at me with those beautiful green eyes of his. A darkness swam within the depths of them. It was a sickening darkness that 𝐿𝐤𝐧𝐼𝐸 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. Pushed away and focused on the inviting green that surrounded it. If you knew what you were, this wouldn't be such a difficult concept for you to understand, Kieran stated. I arched an eyebrow. I understand that my wolf is healing. I just worried that I was starving or... No, he interrupted. The mate bond. Kieran didn't seem to like whatever the mate bond was by the way his tone changed. I wasn't clueless. I knew somewhat of what a mate was. A mate was like a friend to a person, but I'm guessing in our case it was a bit more. I assumed that considering wolves have mates that werewolves did too. But I didn't quite understand what the mate bond was in this scenario. Mate bond. Mate bond. It's basically a way that our kind claims someone as theirs. This person is a werewolf's other half, and it turns out that you're mine. I couldn't tell if he were happy about the situation or not. My heart was racing and I'm pretty sure my face was red. I was panicking, but all that he managed to do was grimace slightly down at his hands in his lap. How is that possible? I said a little louder than necessary. My voice went up an octave as the room felt 10 degrees hotter. Kieran's head raised back up to look up at me. You act like it's something absolutely crazy, he says humorlessly. My jaw dropped as I had watched him. He sighed and leaned back into the chair. Every single werewolf has one. Your parents were most likely mates. He reasoned. They're literally soulmates. That's the only way I know how to explain it. Soulmates. A person made just for you and only you. That soulmate. And you're mine? I asked slowly. He nodded, which in return caused me to suck in an extremely shaky breath. Shaky because I felt an oncoming cry about to start. This man was terrifying. He was huge and could eat me in like 7 seconds. Now he's sitting here telling me he's the one person made for me. The 𝐏𝐤𝐳, the one person that will make me feel totally complete. How do you know that? I asked, thinking that there was some sort of supernatural glitch in his brain. He didn't say a word as he stood up. I instinctively moved back a bit as he began walking toward me. Relax, he said as he stood in front of me. I nodded as he reached his hand out and grabbed my hand. An intense shock ran from my hand, up my arm, and settled in my chest, creating a hot sensation. That's how I know, he said before pulling his hand away. I scanned over his face. I looked for any signs of lying. Nothing. He looked extremely serious and a bit frustrated. I didn't know why he was frustrated, but I didn't like it. I wanted to say I didn't like it because I was worried I'd made him angry and he'd try to hurt me, but I didn't believe that. He wouldn't hurt me. I'm sorry, I said with sincerity. He closed his eyes and shook his head. When he opened them, they glowed with a bit of a red, which startled me way too much. I jumped back, causing him to a bit too quickly, actually grab me to prevent me from jumping off of the bed. His face was extremely close to mine, and all that I could think to do was breathe through my nose because I didn't want to scare the guy with my morning breath. Minty breath and my face as confusion was writing on his face. Why would you say that? I gulped. He seemed angry and I thought that it was with me. That seemed to make him angry again. He moved back, dropping his arms from my body. No, he said before pausing. It seemed like he was trying to think of what he was about to say. No, what? Never mind. Go get washed up and come back downstairs for lunch. I need you healed to your full potential as soon as possible so we can start training you. Kieran nodded before leaving the room without another word. I sat in silence for a moment as I just watched the door that he left through. My name is Arden. I mumbled, hoping that maybe he would just catch it. My mind was buzzing with thoughts that ranged from the mate bond to lunch. He had said something about training which didn't seem to settle too well with me. We had to do certain trainings in the hospital. They'd make us do odd tests and such. I'm not sure what for, but I'm sure I never passed. The mate bond thing was the main thing swimming through my thoughts. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nogan, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. Kieran happens to be my soulmate, so what does that make us as of now? 3 days ago he was my kidnapper, an hour ago he was my teacher, and now he's my soulmate. Does that mean we are together forever? Now, I gulped, thinking about being together with him. He looked older than me for sure. I didn't want to ask him question like what his last name was or how old he was. But shouldn't I know? I basically have a right to know. Kieran didn't seem like the kind you'd come to if you needed a hug or even to have a child with. He seemed like the person you'd come to if you wanted someone killed or hurt pretty badly. But he never did hurt me. That was a thought too. No matter how angry he seemed to get around me, he never lost it to his wolf like I always do. I wondered what his emotional trigger was. What made him so angry that his eyes flashed that red color? It wasn't really a bright red, more like a rich dark red. It almost reminded me of blood, as odd as it sounds. A knock at the door broke me away from my thoughts. I cleared my food quickly and sat up. Yes, I said loud enough for the person on the other side of the door to hear me. I didn't hear the shower running, so I figured you weren't in the shower yet. I have clothes. I heard the smooth voice of none other than Marilyn say through the door. Okay. I said, quickly getting off of the bed and making my way to the door. I opened it a bit too fast, making Marilyn's eyes widen a bit. To be honest, she was probably just startled by my appearance. She handed me the clothes and made her way down the hall. I hurriedly took the clothes and shut the door. I leaned my back against the closed door, taking a deep breath. I sat my cold hand on my hot forehead. Don't open the drawer, I reminded myself as I headed to the bathroom. Chapter 5, Wolfie has no chill. The shower was nice, but I couldn't find a toothbrush, so I just put the toothpaste in my mouth with some water. I whooshed it around before spitting it out. The clothes Marilyn had given me were interesting. The shirt that she gave me was a bit loose due to the 2 weeks lack food and my lack of actual boobs, but it fit. The sweatpants said pink on the side, but they were actually an army green color. It confused me, but I didn't bother asking her. The bra she had given me was too big for me, and I think the pair of underwear was too small. They didn't really fit me like normal underwear. No one was in the kitchen when I went down there. All that sat on the table was a plate. On it was a toasted cheese sandwich with some fries. My mind told me to take the opportunity to jump out a window and haul us out of here, but something inside of me said otherwise. I already knew it was her. I took a seat at the small table. I poked the sandwich with my fork as I inspected the plate of food. A part of me knew that Kieran would never hurt me, as evil as he may seem, but another part told me that I couldn't really trust anyone. I just met these people days ago, and it's only because one of them drugged me here while I was half dead. Then again, they are helping me. I'd lived my entire thinking I was insane when in reality I was just some giant dog, which doesn't sound much better, but at least I wasn't insane. You think he'd actually try poisoning you? An unfamiliar voice said, breaking me away from my thoughts. I stopped poking at the food and turned to the mysterious voice. It was the man who growled at me when I went to find Kieran. The voice in my head let out a feral growl. She was angry. I already knew that. I didn't have time to react as I felt everything shift from me to her as I flew out of my chair and lunged for the man. He must have seen it coming because he grabbed my wrists and twisted me around so that my arms were crossed in front of me, and my back was pressed against his front. I could tell he wasn't worried or even freaked out by what my body was doing. He was strong, that was for sure. My wolf snarled again when she attempted to free her hands from his grip, but he wouldn't budge. She was stuck and hated it. I tried telling her to stop, but she seemed to just block me out as my screams were nothing. She let out a huff as she pushed back against him with force that I'd only seen her use one other time. His back collided with a wall, instantly putting a dent into it. The sound was almost explosive as the room practically shook. His grip on me loosened, and my wolf used that time to escape. I would have thought she'd run, but instead she launched herself back at him, this time landing a kick to the side of his ribs. She went to do it again, but his hand caught my foot and twisted my leg, making me fall to the floor. I wanted control back. I was laying face first against the floor as the man was holding me against the floor. His hand held my wrists against the cold tile while he straddled me. My wolf didn't exactly want to give up. She was jerking around and snarling. Meanwhile, the man never said a word. My wolf was so focused on trying to get out from under this man that she hadn't noticed the footstep coming toward us until they were separating her and the man from each other. Even as Kieran held my body flush against him, she refused to give me control back. I wasn't strong enough to push through. I felt so useless and weak. I wasn't strong enough to push past the dark part of myself. I felt like an idiot in that moment. But my wolf didn't seem to care. She continued thrashing around, trying to escape Kieran's arms in an attempt to get to the man, who now stood by a confused Marilyn. Kieran held my body unbelievably closer, with strength that I couldn't match. "That's enough," he said in my ear, making my body slowly calm down. I never once stopped staring at the man. To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Nelban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. For some reason, my wolf hated him more than she'd ever hated anyone, even though he'd only done something minor. "Arden, come back," he said lowly in a demanding voice. I tried pushing through again. I could see my vision switch from a heightened state from a blurry one. It had never happened to me before. I never tried fighting her this hard. My body seemed to go numb as my vision returned to normal, and the only thing holding me up was Kieran. I had a massive headache, and all that I could let my body do was lay limp in Kieran's arms, my head angled down toward the floor. "Get him out of here." Kieran's low voice rang through the air in an order meant for Marilyn. I could faintly hear them exit the room. Kieran's one arm went under my legs as the other stayed behind me. He held me like I were baby, which I honestly felt like in that moment. He walked over to the table and sat down in the chair that I had sat in just a moment before the man entered the room. He sat me on his lap like I were a child. I felt like an idiot. What kind of werewolf can't even control themselves? I sat up as his hand ran up and down my back. The sparks were everywhere, and they all met in my chest, creating a hot feeling. I felt my body regain strength just by the small action. We sat there for a while. I didn't look at him. I was still ashamed. No matter what I tried to do, I was never going to be able to be what they were. "Why haven't you just killed me yet?" I asked as my eyes continued staring in the floor. His hand stopped what it had been doing on my back as he used his other hand to move my head so that I was looking at him. His face seemed confused and angry. "Stop that." I tried looking away, but he wouldn't let me. "I'm an embarrassment," I mumbled. "No," he said, looking at me with those beautiful green eyes. "You're a 17-year-old with the knowledge of a 5-year-old. I would never expect you to know not to go against a beta when you're like this." "A beta? That's like a second-in-line person." "Right?" I asked, recalling our conversation from a few days ago. He nodded. "That man was a beta." "My beta?" He corrected, making me remember what Marilyn had called him the first day I came to the house. "You're an alpha." It came out more of a statement than a question. That scared me. He was a leader, and by that standard that would make me a leader since we are mates now. Anyone could have figured that out. His hand dropped from my face. I didn't look away. "To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." I gulped, knowing he knew exactly what I was thinking. "I promise I would never hurt you," he said, sincerity flooding his voice. "Everything I do is to protect you and this pack." It was quiet. I didn't say anything after he'd said what he had. It was obvious he felt something for me, and I knew that I did too. Something about Kieran made me feel like an open book. I wanted him to just hold me and talk to me for hours on end. But that wasn't normal or realistic. I was kidnapped by these people. But it didn't feel like kidnap. It felt like I was supposed to be here. He was a monster. But so was I. I was supposed to fear him, but somehow I felt more comfortable being with him than I had felt with anyone. I guess that's why when he leaned in to kiss me, I didn't really do anything about it. Our lips met only for a brief moment, but it felt like years. Electricity flowed from my lips down to my heart, where it settled into a powerful heat. He pulled away, his green eyes still focused on my grey ones. His hand came up to caress my cheek, and I did nothing but stare back at him. "It's the mate bond, isn't it?" I asked him just above a whisper. "What?" he breathed out as he furrowed his eyebrows. "It's the mate bond that makes me feel like this is so normal," I said, referring to everything that had happened. Everything from being so open with him to kissing him after only knowing him for 3 days. It all felt so normal, almost like I should have kissed him the moment he walked into the room that I was in the first day I woke up. "Yeah. It's how mates are. It's an immediate attraction. If you're lucky," he said the last part in a whisper, making me raise an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I asked, causing him to shake his head. "Doesn't matter. To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "You should eat," Kieran stated, motioning toward the plate. I thought of how cold it must be by now. I didn't feel hungry, but I knew I would be in 20 minutes. I nodded as he began moving me off of his lap to stand up. I sat back down in the chair as he began to leave. "Wait," I said, quickly, causing him to stop and look at me. "You can stay here and eat something. I can't try making something if you don't want to. I doubt I'll know how to even turn the stove on. But I can't try," I said sheepishly. A forlorn smile made its way to his face, causing heat to rise in my cheeks. As promising as that sounds, why don't we all go into town today and grab something to eat? We can get clothes that actually fit you. Do, he offered. As in all you mean. I drug out. Marilyn and Bolton as well. I suddenly remembered the name from a conversation that Marilyn and Kieran had earlier. Bolton must have been that man. Won't Bolton be mad at me? Kieran shook his head. If he were mad at you, he would have killed you by now, he said as if it were nothing making the color flush from my face. Don't worry, he won't hurt you either. I looked at him a little warily as he held his hand out for me. He wanted me to take his hand. Promise. Hesitantly, I took his hand and stood up from my chair. Okay, I guess, I said before walking out of the kitchen with him. Kieran must have trusted me enough to take me out of the house. Now it made me happy knowing that. Even though a part of me knew that this was wrong and I should run as soon as I get the chance. Kieran didn't really give me a reason to. I just didn't know why Kieran rusted my wolf outside of the house. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐴𝐳𝐸 enthusiasm.